from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on Ag Day, the president is talking trade on his tour of Asia. Harvest in North Dakota isn't as bad as some expected. In agribusiness, a reason to plant wheat.
So they decided to put some wheat in as a cover crop. They'll graze it off. They'll decide in the spring whether to add fertilizer to it and try to save it then for grain.
Coverage from the Farm Journal Milk Conference in Las Vegas and the art of harvesting soft-shell crab in Louisiana.
Ag Day, presented by the Chevy Silverado. High-strength steel for high-strength dependability.
Good morning, I'm Clint Griffiths with constant saber rattling from North Korea. Security of its global neighbors gets top billing during President Trump's Asia-Pacific trip. But the president also continues to push key issues of his economic agenda, that's trade. The president wrapping up 2 days in Japan. He now travels to South Korea, where the country's security remains a top concern. Over the next week, he'll also visit with his counterparts in China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. While in Japan, the president said the United States is open for business, but he wanted to reshape the two nations' trade relationship. The president says the U.S. has suffered massive trade deficits with Japan for many years. When the president is pushing for a bilateral trade deal, Japan still prefers a multinational agreement such as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which Trump abandoned.
We're making tremendous progress, I believe, on trade in particular, bringing the deficits down and having a very fair and equal trade. And I look forward to finishing up the discussions. A lot of great work and great friendships have been built, and they will continue to be built. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Meanwhile, the 11 remaining member nations of the Trans-Pacific Partnership will gather next week in Vietnam. Those countries are confident in the TPP, even without U.S. involvement. The Canada Agri-Food Trade Alliance is urging the Canadian government to achieve a trade deal with those Asian countries. With uncertainty of negotiations under the North American Free Trade Agreement, Canada Ag Groups say the TPP is that much more relevant. It's been a mixed bag for harvest this season. Some states are ahead while others have been way behind. Let's see where we stand now with the USDA's latest crop progress numbers. Soybean harvest is headed into the home stretch for most states in the Midwest. Overall, 90% is harvested, just a point behind the 5-year average. Any delays in the Corn Belt are just single digits now. With a majority of beans out, farmers can turn their attention to corn. Overall, corn harvest is 13 points behind, with 70% now in the bin. Last week, we were 18 points behind. State by state, the upper Midwest is struggling to finish. Minnesota corn, 27 points off the average pace. Wisconsin, 26 points behind. Iowa, 17 behind. Those are slight improvements, however, from last week. And there appears to be few delays in getting winter wheat planted. Overall, 91% is complete, 75% is merged. The crop condition rating jumping 3 points from last week, 55% now called good to excellent. Despite months of intense drought this summer, timely rains in August salvaged North Dakota's 2017 corn crop. Production will be down from the record harvest last year, but producers are very happy with what they're registering on their yield monitors. Cliff Naylor reports.
Farmers usually don't like surprises, but there are exceptions, especially when your bushels per acre average far exceeds expectations.
It's surprisingly good considering the little bit of rain we had. It's better than we thought it would be.
David Hager says he's averaging 110 to 120 bushels per acre. Those numbers make this crop average. Statewide, the average for corn is coming in at 133 to 134 bushels to the acre. Moisture in August turned this crop around. In mid-July, 55% of North Dakota's corn was rated at fair, poor, or very poor.
We had a good turnaround in the corn, and fortunately, we didn't have a killing frost in most of the state until the middle of October here. So the ability to mature that corn and dry it down has been a huge factor in yields.
Only 5 to 6 inches of rain fell on Hager's corn all summer long, but the moisture came at exactly the right time.
You drive a half mile through the field, the yield monitors anywhere from high to way low, just because of the soil type and lack of rain on the poor soil.
North Dakota farmers planted 3.4 million acres of corn this year. Statewide, the bushel per average ranges from average to just below. In a year plagued by exceptional to severe drought, producers are very happy to be cutting an average crop. I'm Cliff Naylor reporting for AgDay.
Last year, North Dakota farmers harvested the best crop in state history, averaging 158 bushels to the acre. Powerful thunderstorms charging through parts of the eastern Corn Belt Sunday, battering parts of western Ohio and eastern Indiana. A farm in Jay County, Indiana, took a direct hit, a close call for the family.
My husband and I were in checking the pigs when the tornado hit, and we were actually in the barn, and we made it through, thank God.
Across the state line in Ohio, at least 8 people were injured. The National Weather Service says an EF1 tornado touched down in northwestern Ohio. The storms also hit northeast Pennsylvania, killing 2 men. Now let's turn to Mike Hoffman for an update on crop comments. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Clinton. Our first crop comment comes from Josh Schick over near Gridley, Illinois. He says the crop is in the bin. Now he's just doing some fall field work. Joe Canay over in Ashton, Illinois is loading the last truck. Corn harvest is also complete there. He says the corn yield is good, just a little below 2016. John says soybean yields are very good as well. Now, taking a look at the weather map, you can see several cold fronts on the map, and all of these are going to continue to bring colder air to the eastern parts of the country. We'll have your forecast coming up, but first here are some hometown temps.
Farm Journal On Air is the go-to app for American agriculture. AgDay, AgriTalk, U.S. Farm Report, and more. 24/7 access to all of your favorite shows, TV and radio. In your hands, on demand. Farm Journal On Air. Download the app today.
We'll search for incentives to put weed in the ground. That's next in agribusiness. And later, harvesting soft-shell crab takes plenty of timing and know-how, but this industry's been going through plenty of growing pains. Details from Louisiana today on In the Country.
Unlock the power of ag technology this December in Indianapolis at the first ever Ag Tech Expo. Learn all about it at farmjournalagtech.com.
In agribusiness, let's see how markets started a fresh week on this, the 11th month of the year.
Today in soybeans, they were up. The market is firming up ahead of the USDA report that's later on in the week. The traders are really trying to stake out their claim and getting a jump on their positions amid the expectations of a bullish report. Corn, not so much. It has been mixed, and the market has been moving sideways as they're uncertain about what the forecast is going to be for the yield numbers. Certainly the market has had some gyrations, but it really has stayed within a very tight range over the last number of months. With it hanging out here on its lows, it's very difficult that even if we do get a bearish report, there's nowhere for the market to go. Cattle was mixed. Meat packers continue to pay up, and they keep futures prices very strong. We have a big USDA report on the grain side that may have a little bit of effect on the cattle market, and so we're going to watch for that. That's not coming until later in the week. Hogs, on the other hand, was lower again. Cash prices were easier to start this week off, and the expected fall supplies are really plentiful, certainly ahead of the Thanksgiving Day holiday, and it may continue even after. That's all from the floor at the CME Group. I'm Virginia McGathy.
Winter wheat planting is nearing completion, but there are a lot of questions about acreage this year. Tyne Morgan has more from the road in today's analysis.
Here now with Arlen Suderman. Arlen, let's talk wheat. I saw a picture on Twitter the other day, and this farmer said, yes, I'm planting wheat. No, I don't know why. And I'm hearing a lot of that from the field right now when you look at wheat prices. So what is the incentive to plant wheat at this point?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like that quote. It depends on what part of the country you're in. We have some parts of the country, particularly in the high plains, where they don't have a lot of alternatives. But we also have areas there where they finally received some rain. They have some good moisture, so they've decided to put some wheat in as a cover crop. They'll graze it off. They'll decide in the spring whether to add fertilizer to it and try to save it then for grain. But in the meantime, we have a lot of people putting wheat in as a rotational crop. Certainly it doesn't pay off economically relative to alternative crops, and that's why we're at 100-year lows for wheat acres.
Yeah, you do not expect those wheat acres to see much of an increase this year?
No, I think we'll be down another 4 to 6% this year.
Gosh, and that really just hurts the wheat industry. So, I mean, really, it's all about price right now. So what has to happen to get more favorable prices and buy back some of those acres?
Well, we're growing wheat all over the world. And because of currency exchange rates, we're encouraging expansion overseas, like in the Black Sea area, while we contract acres. So we need to go for the quality market. Farmers really need to plant for protein wheat. They need to manage for protein wheat and sell it as such.
All right, so when do you think we could see a turnaround? I mean, when do you think we could finally see some life in these wheat prices?
Well, we're going to have a weather problem somewhere in a major producing area of the world. And right now, there's none on the horizon.
Just one problem, or do we need multiple problems, considering how much of a world product this really is?
Well, when you look at world patterns, we tend to have years when the weather is kind of favorable everywhere, or where it's not favorable everywhere, and then it turns around quickly. And that's probably what's going to end up happening at some point.
All right, Arlen, thanks so much for joining us. Stay with us. We need to take a quick break, and then we'll have a check of your weather on Ag Day.
Contact Arlen Suderman by email at arlen.suderman@intlfcstone.com.
Receive a free trial of the Daily Grain Plan newsletter from Roach Ag Marketing. Text Roach to 31313. Start your subscription today by texting Roach to 31313.
Ag Day weather, brought to you by Kawasaki and the new Mule Pro FXR side-by-side. Ride like a boss with high-end styling and rugged capability.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Our meteorologist Mike Hoffman. Mike, we had some pretty nasty weather over the weekend. What does this week look like?
Yeah, a lot calmer, first of all.
Okay.
We were not going to see any of that warm, humid air that did help to cause some of those tornadoes across the Midwest. The warmer air has been shoved farther south where it should be for this time of the year. There's a fair amount of rain there in the eastern Tennessee Valley, but this first cold front really cooled things down across most of the Midwest, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes. Another cold front coming southward, and a stronger cold front yet coming southward through Canada. And we also have a powerful system off the west coast, but it's not exactly going to come blasting eastward. Let's put the maps into motion. By later today, this first system moving into the mid-Atlantic states. Lots of rain with that system, just scattered showers along the cold front. Not much moisture at all with this secondary front. It just kind of reinforces the colder air. That moves through the lower Great Lakes and into the Ohio Valley as we head toward tomorrow morning. The strong cold front then pushing the coldest air of the season into the far northern plains as we head through the day tomorrow. And you can see that does make progress southward, taking in North Dakota, northern Minnesota, and the western portions of the UP of Michigan. The system out west still kind of barely coming on shore, I suppose. It's going to have a fair amount of rain with it, but it's not going to move eastward real quickly the way it looks. So precipitation estimate over the past 24 hours, we've seen some decent amounts across the Tennessee Valley, and you can see as we add in the next 36 hours, once we get all of the information here on the screen, you can see lots of moisture into the mid-Atlantic states and a little bit back along that front into Texas. None of that real heavy, maybe a few spots there in the southern Appalachians to get a fair amount of rain. Taking a look at snowfall estimates over the past 24 hours, adding in the next 36 hours, we'll add some more across parts of the western plains and northern plains, but we're not talking any huge snowstorms coming up anytime soon. Really just that area from the panhandle in Nebraska back in the southeastern portions of Wyoming. Highs today, there's the cold air. 30s and 40s pushed all the way southward into the middle Mississippi Valley, still 80s along the Gulf Coast. Lows tonight going to drop off pretty significantly into the teens in the far northern plains, still 60s, pretty muggy in the southeast. And you can see the cooler air shoves that warm stuff all the way into Florida. That's about the only place left where it's real warm. Highs only 25 in Bismarck on our computer model for tomorrow. And that's all because of the jet stream. Big trough diving into the Great Lakes. You notice how it kind of weakens again, though. And then another shot of colder air as we head into the weekend. So still lots of changes in the jet stream over the next week. That's a look across the country. Now let's take a look at some local forecasts. First of all, for Cheyenne, Wyoming, colder with just a bit of snow, high temperature of 29. Monroe, Louisiana, rather humid, mostly cloudy, high around 80. And finally, Akron, Ohio, lots of clouds and chilly, high temperature in the afternoon, 46.
Some of the nation's elite dairy producers and trade analysts are in Las Vegas this week. We'll take a look at the dairy industry from Farm Journal's Milk Business Conference. And later, soft-shell crab is a seafood favorite. We'll head to Louisiana to check on the challenges that industry is facing.
Ag Day, brought to you by Liberty Herbicide, the simply better solution for superior weed control and a stronger yield. The Dairy Report on Ag Day is brought to you by QLF. For 40 years, QLF has been proud to support American farmers that feed the world.
Farm Journal's Milk Business Conference is underway out in Las Vegas, and this year producers in attendance are looking for answers to what's been a stagnant milk market. Tyne Morgan is in Vegas this week, along with market analyst Mike North.
Mike, when we look at these dairy prices today, we look at this just overload of milk that we have. What is the general mood in dairy country right now?
It's not very good, and that's largely a function of the prices that many are looking at for 2018. We have a $15.50 average for the first half of the year. We have a $15.80 average for the whole year, and that is a price zone that doesn't get anyone excited. It's a lot of red ink out there, and that sours a lot of attitudes.
Yeah, so then how do we switch these prices? What do we need to happen? You look at so much uncertainty with trade. We look at domestic demand. What needs to give at this point?
Well, I hate to boil it down to simple supply and demand, but that's really the answer to your question. The reality is we have too much product. If you look at nearly every product category, we're carrying much more than we did last year, and we don't have the domestic consumption to handle it all. So exports have been the big hope. Well, exports are coming, and they've certainly been growing, but they're not large enough to claw back these big inventory builds that we've made over the last year.
Can domestic demand grow enough to make up for kind of the lack of exports?
It can't, at least in the short term. Long term, yes, but in the short run, there's just too much inventory to grow fast. It would require about a 4 to 5% growth, and we generally average about a 1.5% growth.
So Mike, in the grain markets, we talk about a black swan, that possibly it could be a black swan that really turns these prices around. Could something like that happen in the dairy industry to turn prices around? And if so, what would kind of a black swan event be?
So we've had a couple of them. They're kind of smaller swans, but New Zealand had a rough start to its grazing season, and so it's behind the production curve. The Europeans had bad weather in Germany and France this year that held back production that otherwise would have grown more rapidly. We've had some buyout programs in Europe. They had the phosphorus reduction program in the Netherlands. If we saw something in the United States that grossly retracted supply, that would be one of those black swan events. Maybe it's quotas at the co-op level. Maybe it's several different programs, but we don't know what those are.
All right, thanks, Tyne. When we come back, seafood farming in Louisiana.
In the country, brought to you by Kubota. Learn more about Kubota SSV Series skid steers at Kubota.com or demo one at your local Kubota dealer today.
Soft-shell crab production calls for a commitment because of the tedious task of monitoring the crabs throughout their molting process. Decreasing crab populations are threatening that industry, but for those producers hanging on, the demand for soft-shell crabs is strong. LSU Ag Center's Craig Gautreaux has this report.
So you can't pull that. He's trying to make this cloth.
Daniel Edgar has been producing soft-shell crabs for more than 30 years. He says there are many factors involved in producing the perfect soft shell, but one of the most important is having a system that can maintain good water quality.
The greatest challenge is when you add more crabs to the system, you're going to raise your ammonia level, raise your nitrite level. That is the absolute challenge for doing soft-shell crabs.
Decreasing crab populations is another hurdle. Julie Lively, a researcher with the LSU Ag Center's School of Renewable Natural Resources, is examining a virus specific to blue crabs. This virus has nearly 100% mortality rate and could explain some of the die-offs in soft-shell facilities.
So we're trying to understand if this virus is actually a major problem for the soft-shell industry, and if we can identify what is causing the problem to maybe help give best management recommendations to solve it.
Soft-shell crabs are considered a delicacy by humans and are preferred by many species of fish. During the molting process, they are virtually defenseless against predators.
You've got redfish and drum that eat the hard crabs, and jack crevalles, they eat hard crabs. But soft shells, everything out there eats a soft shell.
Another issue with raising soft-shell crabs is they must be monitored around the clock and removed at just the right time.
That's one of the problems with soft shell, is that people have to check their systems almost every 4 or 5 hours at least to make sure that they aren't starting to harden in the water.
If producers like Edgar are successful in producing the right soft shell, they have no problem selling them on the market because demand exceeds supply. With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
Louisiana has seen its number of soft-shell producers drop from around 250 producers to fewer than 50 in the past 15 years. That's all the time we have this morning. Sure glad you tuned in. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest-lasting heavy-duty pickups.